I guess I should start at the beginning. I'm Dean, 36, and for most of my life, I've been the guy who kept things bottled up. Not because I didn't feel things, but because I learned early on that reacting never did me any favors. I grew up in a house where my father believed that emotions were a weakness. If something bothered you, you swallowed it. If someone wronged you, you endured. That's how I lived my life, watching, listening, absorbing every little slight, every little betrayal, but never letting it show. I wasn't the kind of guy people noticed right away. Not the loudest in the room, not the most charming, but I was steady. Reliable. The guy people came to when they needed help, but never the one they stayed for. I thought I had made peace with that. Then I met Selena. She was everything I wasn't, loud, confident, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and own it without trying. She had this energy about her that pulled people in, and somehow she pulled me in too. I don't know what she saw in me, but she made me feel like I mattered. Like I was seen. For the first time in my life, I let my guard down. Our relationship started fast. It was electric. She dragged me out of my comfort zone, and for once, I didn't mind. I wanted to be what she saw in me. We got married after a year, and for a while, I thought I had everything I never dared to hope for. But life has a way of showing you that happiness is just borrowed time. The first signs were small. A shift in her tone when she spoke to me. The way she stopped looking at me like I was the most important person in the room. The texts that took longer to respond to. The nights she came home later and later, claiming she lost track of time. I didn't want to believe it at first. I told myself I was overthinking. But when you've spent your whole life observing, you learn to see things for what they really are. And something was wrong. At first, I told myself it was just the natural ebb and flow of a marriage. The honeymoon phase fades, and people settle into routine. That's normal, right? But normal doesn't feel like sleeping next to someone and still feeling alone. Normal isn't watching your wife check her phone with a little smirk and then turn the screen away when you glance over. Normal isn't hearing her laugh, really laugh, only when she's on a call, never when she's talking to you. I tried to bring it up once, casually. "You've been busy lately," I said one night as she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up. "Yeah, work's been a lot." That was another thing. She had started talking about work constantly. The people she worked with, the long hours, the office drama. It was a convenient excuse, and I wanted to believe it. But deep down I knew. I knew because I had seen this before. Maybe not in my own life, but in others. My father had been cheated on by my mother before she left. My best friend in college had been strung along by a girl who swore nothing was going on, only for him to find out months later that she had moved on before their relationship had even ended. I had spent my life watching, and I knew the signs. Still, I said nothing. Because what was I supposed to do? Accuse her without proof? Demand answers when I wasn't sure I wanted to hear them? So I did what I had always done. I waited. I watched. I let the silence stretch between us, hoping she'd break it before I did. And then one night, I overheard her friends talking. It was at a party we had both been invited to. She had wandered off with her group of friends, and I had stepped outside for some air. That's when I heard them, Selena's closest friends, the ones she trusted with everything. They were laughing. One of them, a woman named Kara, said something that made my stomach drop. "I still can't believe she's pulling this off. I mean, juggling two guys? That's some next-level stuff." Another one, laughing, chimed in. "She always lands on her feet. She'll figure it out. She always does." Then, a name. Cyrus. I didn't know who Cyrus was, but in that moment, I knew exactly who he was. And just like that, whatever hope I had left shattered. I don't know why I didn't ask her that night. Maybe a part of me already knew what the answer would be, and I wasn't ready to hear it. But once I heard that name, Cyrus, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It started showing up everywhere. In casual conversations she had on the phone, in passing mentions from her friends when they thought I wasn't listening. The way she'd smile, just a little, when she got a text and quickly put her phone away. I needed to know. So for the first time in our marriage, I crossed a line. One night, when she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. I knew the passcode, she hadn't changed it. Maybe she never thought I would look. I went to her messages, scrolling down until I found it. Cyrus. My hands were shaking. I don't think I realized how much until I had to steady my thumb to tap on the chat. And there it was. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Late-night messages. A familiarity in their words that shouldn't have been there. And then the one message that made my stomach drop. He's so clueless. I almost feel bad. Almost. I don't remember how long I stood there staring at the screen, reading and rereading that one line. The water was still running in the bathroom, steam curling out from under the door. Selena was just a few feet away, completely unaware that I knew. I put the phone back. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my knees, trying to breathe. I should have confronted her right then. I should have stormed into that bathroom, demanded answers, made her see what she was doing to me. But I didn't. Because for the first time in my life, I felt something worse than anger. I felt powerless. And I knew that whatever came next, there was no coming back from it. I tried to ignore it. For days, maybe weeks, I told myself I was just paranoid. That I had misheard them, that I was letting my own insecurities get the best of me. But the name Cyrus stuck in my head like a splinter, something small and sharp that I couldn't get rid of no matter how hard I tried. I never brought it up to Selena. Instead, I watched. It's funny how you can live with someone, share a bed with them, and not really see them until you're looking for something. Maybe that was my second mistake, thinking that if I just kept my head down, things would fix themselves. That she would come back to me. That whatever was pulling her away would pass. But it didn't. Selena started going out more. At first, it was once a week. Then twice. Then it felt like she was never home. She'd throw out excuses before I could even ask. Melissa's having a tough time, work event, just need a night to unwind. The worst part was that she said it so easily, so casually, like she wasn't even worried I might question it. And maybe that's because she knew I wouldn't. Because she knew me well enough to know I wouldn't push. But I was pushing in my own way. I started listening more. Paying attention. And I noticed things. She'd dress up more, put on perfume before leaving. She'd come home late and go straight to the shower, even when she didn't smell like sweat or alcohol. Her texts became shorter, more distant, as if every reply to me was just an obligation. And then there was the laughing. One night, she was in the kitchen, talking on the phone. She didn't see me walk in. I wasn't trying to sneak up on her, but when I heard her laugh, that bright, flirtatious laugh I hadn't heard in months, it made me stop in my tracks. I hadn't even realized how much I missed the sound of it until I heard it again. Except it wasn't for me. She said his name. "Cyrus, you're so bad," she giggled, twirling her hair around her finger like a damn teenager. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I might be sick. I stood there waiting, hoping she'd say something that would make it all okay. Something that would prove I was wrong. But all she said was, "I'll see you soon." I walked away before she could turn around. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled on her phone, laughing quietly to herself. And I realized something that nearly broke me. I had already lost her. Maybe she was still here, still in our home, still wearing my ring, but her heart wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. But if she thought I was going to just sit back and let it happen, she didn't know me at all. I don't know why I waited. Maybe part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. That she was just being careless, thoughtless, but not cruel. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, to explode over suspicion alone. But something inside me had shifted that night when I heard her say his name. It was like a switch had flipped, and suddenly, I couldn't ignore the weight pressing down on me anymore. I started noticing every little detail. The way she'd come home later than she promised. The way she'd turn her phone screen away from me even when it was just sitting on the couch. I watched her type out messages, hesitate, then delete them before sending. And it wasn't just the phone. It was her entire presence. She was different. The woman who used to grab my hand in the middle of a movie just because she liked feeling close to me now barely looked me in the eye. I was becoming invisible in my own home. One night, I decided I needed answers. I didn't want to be the guy who went through his wife's phone, who snooped like some insecure fool, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in the dark. So when she fell asleep, I reached for it. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't. The phone was locked. Of course it was. But what made my stomach drop was that she had changed the passcode. I hadn't tried to check before, but I knew it wasn't the same. We never had a reason to hide things from each other before. And now? Now she was locking me out, literally and figuratively. I put the phone down and just sat there, watching her sleep. Peaceful. As if there wasn't a single weight on her shoulders. As if she wasn't lying to me every single day. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I acted normal. I kissed her forehead before she left for work. I told her to have a good day. I even smiled when she said she had plans that night. And when she left, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I followed her. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I hoped I'd catch her at some cafe with Melissa, proving that I was just a paranoid, jealous idiot. Maybe I thought I'd see something innocent, something I could use to convince myself that my marriage wasn't unraveling right in front of me. But life isn't kind like that. She didn't go to work. She didn't even go downtown. I trailed her from a safe distance as she drove across town, taking streets we never had any reason to use. And then she pulled into the parking lot of a gym I had never seen her set foot in before. She parked. Sat there for a minute, checking her phone, fixing her hair. Then she got out. And he was already waiting for her. Tall. Built. That easy, cocky smirk that made my hands curl into fists. He didn't even hesitate, just wrapped an arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. I stood there, parked down the street, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I should have gotten out. Should have walked straight up to them and ended it right there. But I didn't. I watched as she laughed, tilting her head in that way she used to do with me. I watched as she touched his arm, as he leaned in close. And then they went inside together. I had my answer. I didn't remember driving home. I didn't remember anything except the way my chest ached like something inside me had cracked wide open. Like my whole life had been split into two halves, before and after. That night, she came home smelling like soap and mint gum, like she had washed away every trace of where she had been. She curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to the fact that I knew. That I had seen. I could have confronted her right then. Could have torn everything apart. But I didn't. Not yet. Because if she wanted to play games, I was done being the fool. The days that followed felt surreal, like I was living someone else's life. I went through the motions, waking up, going to work, coming home, pretending like everything was fine while my mind churned with the weight of what I had seen. Every time I looked at Selena, I saw her with him. That easy smile, that familiar touch. It wasn't mine anymore. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to make her say it. But every time I came close, I stopped myself. Because I knew her. I knew how she worked. If I came at her with accusations, she'd flip it back on me. Call me paranoid, controlling. She'd lie, twist things, make me second-guess what I knew was true. No. If I was going to do this, I needed more. I needed something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I started digging. At first, it was small things. Checking her social media activity. Noticing when she was online, who she liked posts from, who she followed. I started watching how often she picked up her phone, how her fingers flew across the screen like she was carrying on a conversation she didn't want me to hear. Then one night when she was in the shower, I finally got my break. She left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I don't know what made me check. Maybe I just couldn't take it anymore. Maybe some part of me still wanted to be proven wrong. I sat down, opened the browser, and there it was. Her messages were still logged in. And right at the top, Cyrus. I hesitated, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. But I clicked. And what I saw made my whole body go cold. It wasn't just flirting. It wasn't just some emotional affair. It was full-blown, undeniable betrayal. I miss you already. Last night was amazing, I can still feel you on me. I can't wait until we have more time together, it's so hard sneaking around. Page after page of messages, late-night conversations, inside jokes I had never heard before. Her telling him she was stuck at home, playing the good wife, while I sat just a few feet away, completely unaware. They had been meeting up for months. Hotels, his place, sometimes even during the day while I was at work. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had braced myself for the truth. But nothing could have prepared me for this. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop. I sat there, staring at nothing, listening to the sound of the shower running upstairs. Selena, my wife, was up there washing herself off while another man's words still lingered in the air. And in that moment, something inside me finally snapped. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I wasn't going to sit back and let her make me a fool. She wanted to play her games? Fine. But she had no idea who she was up against. I didn't confront her that night. No, that would have been too easy. Too emotional. And if there was one thing I learned about Selena, it was that she thrived in chaos, twisting arguments, making herself the victim, flipping everything on its head until I was the one apologizing. I wasn't going to give her that chance. Not this time. Instead, I played along. I sat with her on the couch, listened to her talk about her day, watched her act like the devoted wife she pretended to be. Every fake smile, every casual touch, it all made my skin crawl. I had to remind myself to keep breathing, to keep my hands steady, to not let her see the fire burning inside me. Because I had a plan. The next morning, while she was still asleep, I got up early. I went through her laptop again, took screenshots of every message, every hotel confirmation, every disgusting little exchange she had with Cyrus. I sent them to myself, made copies, stored them somewhere safe. Then I started watching them even closer. Selena's routine hadn't changed. She still left at the same times, still gave the same excuses. But now, I knew exactly where she was going. And this time, I wasn't just going to follow her. I was going to catch her. A few days later, I got my opportunity. She told me she was going out with the girls again. Same excuse, same fake smile. I kissed her goodbye, told her to have fun, and the second she walked out that door, I was right behind her. She drove across town, same gym, same parking lot. And just like before, he was waiting for her. I sat there in my car, watching as she got out and walked straight into his arms. No hesitation. No guilt. She laughed as he kissed her neck, her hands sliding over his chest like she had done it 100 times before. And in that moment, something in me went deadly calm. I got out of my car. I don't think they even noticed me at first. They were too busy wrapped up in each other. But the second I stepped closer, Selena must have felt it. That instinct, that sixth sense, because she suddenly stiffened, pulling back just enough to turn her head. And then she saw me. Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might pass out. She pulled away from Cyrus like she had just touched fire, stumbling back a step. Dean, she started, but I held up a hand. Cyrus turned around, confused at first, then smirking like he thought this was funny. That's what got me. The smirk. Like I was just some joke to him. Like my entire marriage, my entire life, was nothing more than something to laugh at. I don't even remember making the decision to move. 1 second I was standing there, and the next, I had my fist buried in his gut. He doubled over, coughing, eyes wide with shock. "What the hell, man?" he wheezed, staggering back. Selena grabbed my arm, but I shook her off. "Don't," I said, my voice low, steady. "Don't even try." She actually had the nerve to look offended. "Dean, it's not what it looks like." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Not what it looks like." I repeated. "So what, Selena? You just tripped into his arms? He's just a friend." I turned to Cyrus, who was still trying to catch his breath. "Tell me, man. Do you always make out with married women in parking lots? Or is this just a special occasion?" Cyrus straightened, rolling his shoulders like he thought we were about to square up. "Listen, dude, maybe you should calm." I stepped closer, cutting him off. "You don't get to tell me what to do," I said quietly. "You don't speak to me." For the first time, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Uncertainty. Good. Selena tried again. "Dean, let's go home and talk." I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I felt was disgust. "We're past talking, Selena." I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. Her eyes darted to the screen, and I knew the second she realized what she was looking at. Her own messages. Her own betrayal, staring her right in the face. She gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Yeah," I said. "Oh my God." She reached for my arm again, but I stepped back. "Don't," I warned. "Don't touch me." Cyrus, apparently realizing he had lost whatever power he thought he had in this situation, scoffed. Whatever, man. If you couldn't keep your wife happy, that's your problem. That was it. That was the moment everything snapped. I don't remember grabbing the bat from my trunk. I don't remember the first swing. But I remember the sound. The way it cracked against his ribs, the way he screamed, the way he hit the pavement with a thud. Selena was screaming too, begging me to stop, trying to pull me back, but I wasn't hearing her. I wasn't hearing anything. Just the blood roaring in my ears, the red haze clouding my vision. I don't know how long it lasted. A minute? 2? But by the time my head cleared, Cyrus was barely moving. Groaning, coughing up blood. His smirk was gone. And so was the man I used to be. I dropped the bat. Stared down at my hands, my chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. Selena was sobbing, shaking, staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Like I was the monster in this situation. Sirens in the distance. I didn't run. I didn't fight when they came for me. Because the truth was, I had already lost everything. The cell was cold. Bare. A concrete box with a metal bed, a toilet, and a silence so thick it pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands, bruised, swollen, still stained with dried blood. Cyrus's blood. They had me in holding first. Processed me like I was just another case number, another name on a list. The officer who booked me barely looked me in the eye. Maybe he'd seen this before, some guy who finally snapped, who lost everything in a moment of blind rage. Maybe he had no sympathy for me. Or maybe he understood exactly how I got here. I didn't say a word. Not when they cuffed me. Not when they shoved me into the back of the squad car. Not when Selena's voice rang out behind me, screaming, crying, pleading, "Dean. Dean, please." What was she begging for? For me to take it back? For me to tell her it was okay? That she could go back to Cyrus, wipe the blood off his face, and keep pretending like our marriage wasn't just a long, slow funeral? I had nothing left to say to her. The first night in that cell, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it all play out again. The moment I stepped out of my car, the way Selena's face went pale, the way Cyrus smirked at me like he thought this was just a joke. The first swing of the bat. The sound of it connecting with bone. The way he crumpled like a broken doll. I didn't regret it. Not at first. The regret came later, when the rage burned out and left nothing but ash. I had ruined my life in a matter of minutes. My job, my freedom, my entire future, all of it gone. And for what? Selena wasn't worth it. Cyrus wasn't worth it. No matter how much they deserved to be exposed, to be humiliated, to be punished, I was the one sitting behind bars while they got to walk free. And that's when it hit me. I lost. The second I let that rage take over, the second I let my fists and that bat speak for me, I became the villain in my own story. It didn't matter that Selena had betrayed me. It didn't matter that Cyrus had taken everything that was supposed to be mine. All that mattered now was what I had done. The door to the cell opened with a loud clang, pulling me from my thoughts. A guard stepped in, expression unreadable. "You've got a visitor." For a second, I thought maybe it was my lawyer. But when I stepped into the visitation room, it wasn't some suit waiting for me. It was Selena. She looked awful. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, her eyes red and puffy like she hadn't slept in days. She was gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I sat down across from her. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stared. She was the first to break the silence. "Dean," she whispered, voice shaking. I don't even know where to start." I leaned back in my chair, my voice flat. "Then don't." Her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry." I let out a breath through my nose. A bitter, humorless sound. For what, exactly? Getting caught? Or ruining my life? She flinched like I'd hit her. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this." I scoffed, shaking my head. "You didn't want it, but you sure as hell let it happen." She wiped at her face, sniffling. "Cyrus, he's in the hospital. Is he dead?" I asked, my tone empty. Her lip trembled. "No." Then he got off easy. She let out a shaky breath. "Dean, I never meant to hurt you. I swear I slammed my hands against the table, cutting her off. "Stop lying." She jumped, eyes wide, breathing uneven. I saw the messages, Selena. I saw everything, I said, my voice quieter now, steadier, but sharp enough to cut. You didn't just make a mistake. You planned it. You chose him. Over and over again. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I exhaled, shaking my head. I don't even know why you're here. To feel better? To tell me you're sorry so you can sleep at night. She bit her lip, looking down. I just needed you to know that I hate myself for this. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I let out a bitter laugh. You don't expect me to forgive you? I leaned forward, my voice dropping. Good. Because I never will. Her breath hitched. You destroyed me, I said, my hands curling into fists. And the worst part? You didn't even care. You came home every night, looked me in the eye, kissed me, acted like everything was fine while you were screwing him behind my back. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay calm. You don't get to sit here and cry about how bad you feel. You don't get to be the victim in this story, Selena. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't even try to wipe them away this time. For the first time in days, I felt something close to relief. Because finally, I saw it in her eyes. Guilt. She knew she had ruined everything. She knew she had lost the only person who had ever truly loved her. And that was the only justice I was ever going to get. The guard came back then, clearing his throat. Time's up. I stood, stepping back. Selena stayed seated, her hands still gripping the table like she wasn't ready to let go. I looked down at her one last time. Goodbye, Selena. She broke down completely. Sobbed into her hands as I turned and walked away. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I didn't look back. Jail has a way of stripping a man down to nothing. The first week, I still felt the heat of what I'd done, like an ember burning in my chest. The fight, the rage, the betrayal, it all felt raw. But by the second week, when the routine set in, when the walls felt closer and the silence stretched longer, something else settled in. Regret. Not the kind of regret that makes you wish you could take it all back. I didn't. If I had the chance to do it over, I might have done it different, maybe not let the bat do the talking, but I would have confronted them. I would have exposed them, made them face what they had done. But I also knew that none of it mattered now. I was here. Stuck. And my life, the life I had spent years building, the life I thought was solid, stable, was over. The lawyer they assigned me wasn't bad. He was one of those guys who had seen every type of case, who didn't flinch when I told him exactly what happened. You let your emotions take over, he had said, tapping his pen against the file. Juries don't like that. But we might be able to argue temporary insanity, diminished capacity. No prior record. That helps. You're a first-time offender, and your wife's infidelity will play in your favor. Will it? I asked, voice dry. He shrugged. People sympathize with a man who gets cheated on. Especially when the other guy rubs it in his face. He flipped through the pages of my file. But let's not kid ourselves. You put a guy in the hospital. They won't just let you walk. I knew that. I had known it the second I dropped the bat and saw Cyrus gasping on the pavement. But hearing it out loud made it sink in. This was my life now. Court dates. Lawyers. A cell with a bed that felt like a slab of rock. And Selena? I hadn't heard from her since that last visit. Part of me thought she might try again. Show up, plead, cry, try to twist the knife in some new creative way. But she didn't. Maybe she finally realized there was nothing left to say. Maybe she had run straight into Cyrus's arms the second she left that room, and he convinced her that he was the victim in all this. That I was the monster. I wasn't sure which version was worse. One afternoon, the guard came to my cell and said I had another visitor. I didn't care. Didn't want to see anyone. But when I stepped into the visitation room, it wasn't Selena. It was my brother, Evan. We weren't close. Not in the way brothers should be. He was younger by a few years, always the loud one, the reckless one. The one who made the mistakes, while I was the one who cleaned them up. We hadn't talked much in recent years. A text here, a call there. And now, here he was, sitting across from me, looking like he had just seen a ghost. Jesus, Dean, he said, shaking his head. I still can't believe this. I leaned back in the chair. You and me both. He studied me for a moment. Why'd you do it? I let out a breath. You know why. Yeah, I know why, he said, voice tight. But why? You could have left her. You could have let her rot in her own guilt. Instead he exhaled, rubbing his face. You lost everything, man. Like I didn't already know that. I didn't answer. Evan ran a hand through his hair, frustration written all over his face. You're looking at years, Dean. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. He shook his head again, leaning forward. I don't get it. You've always been the calm one. The one who lets things slide. Who holds it together. So what the hell happened? What happened? I did what I always did. I swallowed it all. The anger. The betrayal. The humiliation. I let it fester until it turned into something I couldn't control. I met his eyes, my voice low. I broke, Evan. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed, leaning back. Yeah. I guess you did. We sat in silence after that. Neither of us knew what to say. What was there to say? I had done what I had done. He couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix it. Eventually, he stood. I'll be here, he said, voice gruff. Whatever happens next, you're not dealing with it alone. I nodded, but I didn't really believe him. Because when you're sitting in a cell, staring at the walls, waiting for the next piece of your life to be stripped away, you realize something real quick. No matter who says they'll stand by you, no matter who promises they'll help. In the end, you're always alone. Time lost meaning in jail. The days blended together, long stretches of nothingness interrupted only by mealtimes, roll calls, and the occasional courtroom appearance. My lawyer did his best, arguing that I had been provoked, that I had acted in the heat of passion after discovering my wife's affair. The judge listened, but the law didn't care about my feelings. The prosecution painted me as a violent man, a danger to society. They played the security footage from the parking lot, showed the photos of Cyrus's injuries, his broken ribs, the damage to his face, the blood on the pavement. They didn't care what led up to it. They didn't care about the months of betrayal, the quiet suffering, the humiliation. They only cared about what I had done. I pleaded guilty to aggravated assault. It was the best option, my lawyer told me. A trial could have led to worse. This way, there was a chance for leniency. A chance to salvage something of my life. Sentencing day came, and I stood there, hands cuffed in front of me, listening as the judge laid out my fate. 5 years. Maybe less with good behavior. Maybe more if they decided I wasn't worth a second chance. The gavel came down. That was it. My fate was sealed. I didn't look at anyone as they led me back to my cell. Not the lawyer. Not Evan, who was sitting in the back row, jaw clenched, eyes full of something I couldn't bring myself to name. Not the handful of other people who had come to watch, including, to my shock, Selena. She had been there. Sitting near the back, face pale, eyes rimmed with red. She had the nerve to cry. I turned away before she could meet my gaze. She wasn't worth a second glance. Jail wasn't prison, not yet, but it was its own kind of hell. The worst part wasn't the fights or the boredom or the way the guards barely looked at you like you were nothing more than a number. It was the thinking. When all you have are 4 walls and a cot, your mind becomes your worst enemy. I thought about everything. About my life before Selena. About the man I had been before she came along, before she tore through my life like a wildfire. I thought about the way she used to look at me, like I was the only man in the world, and then the way she had looked at him, Cyrus. Like he was the one she had been waiting for all along. I thought about the moment it all broke. The moment I stepped out of that car and saw them together. The way she pulled away from him too late, like she already knew she was caught. And that smirk on his face. That damn smirk. I replayed it over and over again. The rage. The bat in my hands. The way it felt when I swung, when I heard the impact, when I saw him hit the ground. It was supposed to make me feel better. It was supposed to take away the pain. But here I was, sitting in a cell, and the pain was still there. Months passed. My lawyer filed appeals, but nothing changed. Evan visited when he could. He tried to act normal, cracking jokes, talking about things outside these walls. But I could see the sadness in his eyes, the way he struggled to fill the silence. "You hear about Selena?" he asked one day, sitting across from me in the visitation room. I looked at him, silent. He hesitated. She left town. Moved a few states over. I exhaled slowly, feeling nothing. Good. Cyrus too, he added. They didn't stay together. He's been keeping a low profile since the trial. Guess he didn't like being in the spotlight. I didn't answer. I didn't care. Evan studied me for a long time. You ever think about what comes next? Next. I let out a dry laugh. There is no next. He shook his head. You're not in here forever, Dean. I looked around at the walls, the bars, the gray nothingness of it all. Feels like it. He leaned forward, his voice quiet. You still have a life outside these walls. You just have to decide what to do with it when you get out. I didn't answer. I didn't know if I believed him. But something about what he said stuck with me. For the first time in months, I let myself think about a future. A real one. Not about Selena. Not about Cyrus. Not about revenge or regret. Just about me. Maybe Evan was right. Maybe I could have something after this. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was just the beginning of a different one. Time moved differently behind bars. Some days crawled. Others disappeared before I could even register them. But the one thing that never changed was the waiting. Waiting for meals. Waiting for count. Waiting for something, anything, to remind me that life still existed beyond these walls. Evan kept visiting. He never gave up on me, even when I barely had the energy to talk. One day, he slid a piece of paper across the table. It's from Mom, he said. I hesitated before picking it up. She hadn't spoken to me since the sentencing. I unfolded the note with steady hands. Dean. I don't know what to say. I don't know if I'll ever understand what happened. But you're still my son, and I love you. I hope you find your way back to yourself. It wasn't much. But it was something. That night, I lay in my bunk staring at the ceiling, the words running through my mind. Find your way back. Maybe I didn't know how. Maybe I wasn't even sure I wanted to. But for the first time since I stepped into this place, I realized I wasn't completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, there was still something left to salvage when I got out. The seasons changed, though I barely noticed. Inside, everything stayed the same. Gray walls, metal bars, the constant hum of voices, the heavy silence at night. But I was changing, even if I didn't realize it at first. At some point, I stopped feeling the immediate burn of rage when I thought about Selena and Cyrus. The betrayal was still there, sitting in the back of my mind like a dull ache, but it didn't consume me the way it used to. I had too much time to think, too much time to pick apart every mistake, every choice that had led me here. And for the first time, I started asking myself the one question I had been avoiding since the beginning. What now? Evan kept showing up. He never pushed, never asked me to talk about things I didn't want to, but he was always there. You're not dead, Dean, he told me once. You can either waste away in here, or you can start figuring out what comes next. I didn't have an answer for him then. But a week later, I found myself in the library, picking up a book just to do something. A month after that, I signed up for a class they offered, something about trades, work skills for when you got out. I didn't know why I did it, but maybe some part of me still believed I'd have a life after all of this. Then came the letter. It had been nearly a year since I'd seen Selena's handwriting, but I recognized it instantly. For a long time, I just stared at the envelope, debating whether to open it or throw it away. But I had to know. Dean. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't even know if you'll care. But I needed to say it anyway. I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for everything. For the way I treated you, for the way I took your love for granted. I think about it every day. About how much I hurt you. About how I destroyed everything we had. I'm not with Cyrus. I don't think I ever really wanted to be. After everything, I just wanted to run. I thought if I left, I could pretend none of this had happened. But I can't. I have to live with what I did. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. And then I set it down and just sat there, staring at the wall, waiting for some kind of feeling to hit me. Anger. Satisfaction. Something. But all I felt was nothing. Selena was sorry. Good. But it didn't change anything. It didn't give me back the years I had lost. It didn't erase the humiliation, the pain, the night I lost control and threw my life away. For the first time in a long time, I realized I didn't care about her anymore. The hate, the obsession, the grief, I had carried it all for so long, but it wasn't mine to carry anymore. I folded the letter, set it aside, and lay back on my bunk. I didn't respond. I never would. Because she was part of my past. And for the first time, I was starting to think about my future. The days still felt long, but something had shifted inside me. I no longer woke up with the same weight in my chest. The past still lingered, but it didn't consume me like before. I had finally let go of Selena, of Cyrus, of the life I thought I was supposed to have. I started focusing on myself. The classes helped. Learning a trade gave me something to work toward, something real. I wasn't just passing time anymore, I was preparing for whatever came next. Evan kept visiting, kept reminding me that there was a world outside these walls waiting for me. And slowly, I started to believe him. One day, I got called into the warden's office. My lawyer was there, looking more hopeful than usual. "You're up for parole," he told me. I blinked. I hadn't expected it so soon. "And?" He nodded. "And if all goes well, you could be out in a few months." I sat there, processing his words. Freedom. It felt like a foreign concept. The hearing came faster than I expected. I stood before the board, answering their questions, telling them about the classes, the work I had done on myself. I didn't beg. I didn't make excuses. I just told them the truth. I had lost control, and I had paid for it. But I wasn't the same man I was when I walked through those doors. When the decision came, I barely reacted. Parole granted. I was getting out. Evan was waiting for me on the other side of the gate. "Told you," he said, grinning. I stepped out into the open air, taking my first deep breath as a free man. The world felt bigger, sharper, unfamiliar. But I was ready. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. I was finally moving forward. The first night out, I barely slept. The silence was different, too open, too unfamiliar. But when morning came, I stepped outside, feeling the sun on my face without a fence between us. Evan handed me a set of keys. "It's not much," he said, nodding toward the small apartment he helped set up for me. "But it's a start." I looked at him, then at the road stretching ahead. No bars. No walls. Just possibility. I didn't know exactly what came next. But for the first time in a long time, that didn't scare me. I wasn't Dean, the betrayed husband. I wasn't Dean, the man who lost everything. I was just Dean. And that was enough.